Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 12th of June 2022. And this week I've got Dr. Penny Pullan on the show, the Virtual Leadership PM. Speak to you soon. So this week we are again supported by Tamplo. Tamplo is a online tool that turns meetings into actions and has a number of different features. The bit I'm going to talk about today is around the project and task management and the follow-up. Essentially, you have a clear dashboard that shows you an overview of scheduled tasks, alert for late tasks, an overview of team's progress. It saves you jumping into your Outlook and being diverted by that morass of email that we get. You can create your own daily plan in there, or you can, as a project manager, you may be assigning tasks to people, and those people can look at those, have their own daily plans, adding in their own specific items they've got to do, as well as the things allocated to them. From the project management point of view, you get a dedicated dashboard with a list of tasks, knowing what people are working on each project, and there's a load of collaboration capability in there, with the goal of getting no task left undone, more efficiency and motivation, and clear action plans. So, if you want to see what this is all about, jump along to tinyurl.com/Nigel Creaser Tamplo. That's all one word, Nigel Creaser Tamplo. Have fun. So what's been going on? Since last episode, I have been on holiday, so I've had a good week off over here in the UK and after some friends, and ate a lot, drank a lot, did a lot of messing around on the beach, played games. My creative juices were running, and we were creating silly branding using Canva, which I find quite relaxing. Some others laughed at me at what I was doing, but yeah, it was good fun actually. Really chilled out. Children had a great time. Family had a great time. We celebrated the Queen's Jubilee with all our friends, and yeah, it was a brilliant time. Gave me a lot of time to look back over things as well, and I managed to stay away from worky type things as a priority. So it was good. Really good. So back at it this week, busy week, this last week, usual sort of thing to wind yourself back into the week. But what I had done, I'd also signed up to the PMI virtual global conference. I'm not sure I've got the name of it right there. Try and pick up some learning, which I've watched a couple of shows so far and looking at kind of going through shows, whatever they are, streams, presentations. I'm going to try and get through a bunch of those because it looks like some really interesting stuff on there. And followed up with the training that I went through with the Greek conference, which had access to as a presenter. And there's some fantastic stuff in there that I have still stuck on my wall. I think I mentioned it last time around some presentation stuff. There's some incredible stuff there, and just the presenters were doing some really good jobs, some of which I have got lined up to come on potentially on the show. I've spoken to them briefly and they've gone, yeah, that sounds good. So be able to share some of the great tips that they had to a wider audience with you guys. But the thing that I thought about it is that obviously part of doing this continuing education is grabbing PDUs for my PMP. I never thought about it before, about this chasing it so much, because my work tends to be refresher training. It's really good, but I imagine people out there who haven't got maybe they're independents or not as supportive an organisation as I work for, they struggle to get their PDUs. And it's just a reminder really, is that by listening to this show you can earn PDUs. The contents in these shows, the advice and guidance from the people on this will give you PDUs or any other, I would imagine, in project management type qualifications where you need to continue that continuation, that this would qualify as well. So don't forget to do that. I've changed, put a little stamp of remember to claim your PDUs on the little logos that I put up. So hopefully you'll all remember that. And so just a reminder there to help. And a thing that clicked in last year when I was not very well, one of the considerations I had was about honing down the things that I do and making sure I get myself to focus on things that are right. And I did consider stopping the podcast. For regular listeners, you may realise that I had a break in the middle of the summer, didn't have any there, and the number of interviews I had tailed off, and it was getting quite hard work to actually get people on the show, and there's a lot of effort and quite a bit of stress, I suppose, in making sure that I was able to put the show out, even though I was only doing it a couple of times, really only one episode a month. We crossed over two. It's still quite difficult to get that one interview. And after I thought, no, well, I kind of enjoy it. I'll do it till the end of the year, as in last year, and see how it went. And I'm really glad it did, because it's increased momentum. As I've said before, it's into next year now that I've got scheduled interviews with people. So I'm not worrying about getting people in. I'm not concerned about, again, it's more of a, how do I schedule everyone to interview and make sure that it's usable for the people, because otherwise it goes a long way out. So that's really good. But the thing I thought about this week, I can't remember what I was doing, I don't know why it popped into my head, was that I'm finding that, and I think it was around talking at PDUs and looking at these conferences, is that I've been really, really, really lucky to sit and chat for an hour or so with an expert in their field to find out how they got there and what their background was, hints and tips around their project management journey or their specialist subject, like today's Penny Pullan's around the leadership, the virtual leadership side of it. And I realised that for me, I'm getting an hour's worth of free training by talking to someone, and you guys are getting that training as well, but just being selfish. And I realise how much value I'm taking from those and how much knowledge I'm getting, and realise actually the reason I carried it on was probably subconsciously that's what I was getting out of it. And I realised that it's not about I was concerned that I was doing it and not getting anything from it. I have a bit of a mercenary mind sometimes and think, well, can I monetize this thing? Can I get it to grow? How is it keep helping me? And I'm sure that by having the podcast, that's going to help me with my position in the future. But actually, the innate value of the podcast to me is the learning that I'm getting to be better at what I'm doing. And so it was quite an eye-opener. It's something I just popped up in my head. I thought I'd share that with you guys. So talking about who I've got on the show, last couple of days, I've interviewed a gentleman called Matt Schlegel. I've interviewed a gentleman called Dr. Troy Hall. So those guys are in the hopper, all ready to go. I've interviewed Tammy Watchhorn, who again, she's got a great book coming out towards the my brain's gone, PM Ninjas, I think it's called. And they've all got a different angle on what's coming through. And Dr. Troy is talking about oh my goodness, my brain is mixing up to this morning, which is quite crazy, about the cohesion within businesses, about how your workplace, how to get cohesion within a business. He works with large organizations on that. And Matt Schlegel is talking about enneagrams, which are a way of assessing our innate behavioral techniques and tools. So bit like your bell bin and your disc, but it's slightly different. It's one I've never heard of before and would never have heard of, I don't think, if I'd not been doing this podcast and Matt hadn't taught to me. And he talks about problem solving and using these tools and techniques and people who are there. And those are just like 3 that I've got interviewed that are on their way. And then I've got Andrew Bull, who I spoke to yesterday, and he's got a book called Monsters of Teamwork. And again, it's a different take on some of the topics and how to identify and build your team's capability and improve it, and see where your team problems are, which you don't always spot. And coming up, I just the roster of people I've got coming up, and I've got interviews coming up over the next couple of weeks that again are going to be incredibly good. I've got 2 interviews in a fortnight, another one after that, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 others leading up until early July. I'm taking a break in August on the interview, so the content is coming for you guys there, and for my training. I've got that number of training sessions that I can go through, which is fantastic. And fantastic fun. So I just thought I'd mention that, and we've got a nice healthy back catalogue, forward view. Actually, talking about the back catalogue, if you're new to listening, have a jump back, look at the back catalogue. We've got 3 years worth of shows on there, 3.5 years now, with it being June. Can't believe that we've been interviewing for 3.5 years. This is the 4th year. We're still going. So I'm going to shut up now and let you get on and have a listen to the interview with Penny and virtual working, and hopefully you will, virtual leadership, should I say. Hopefully you'll pick some tips out of this and enjoy. Today I've got Dr. Penny Pullan on the show. Penny is a renowned expert in virtual and hybrid leadership, which we're all getting used to now. She's the author of the bestseller and CEO top 5 book for lockdown, Virtual Leadership, Practical Guides for Getting the Best Out of Virtual Work and Virtual Teams.
Just one thing, I need to update that because it's updated for the 2nd edition. It's now Practical Strategies for Success with Remote or Hybrid Work and Teams.
There we go. Yeah. Things get updated very quickly. Sometimes we version 2s are always great. So Penny works with leaders and teams who are grappling with the challenges of our virtual and hybrid world to enhance collaboration and effectiveness across dispersed and often newly formed teams. And I get that feeling. I imagine lots of people have got that at the moment. Over the last 19 years, probably a bit longer, maybe, I don't know, maybe if you're saying it needs an update, Penny has built and rolled out her virtual leadership model, facilitation tools and techniques, achieving stunning results, working with organizations such as Robert Half, AstraZeneca and the UK government. And people say about her, Penny's virtual leadership ideas are easy to implement and have transformed my effectiveness and that of my team. So welcome to the show, Penny. I'm sure that anyone listening to this is going to go, give me some of that. And actually, I could have done some with that over the last 2 years. So welcome to the show.
Lovely to be on your show. You may find that lots of people who are interested in projects and programs will have seen, I just went nuts at the beginning of lockdowns doing webinars and sessions left, right and centre. So they may have come across some of this. So I hope I've made a difference to lots of project and program managers.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. And I think it's interesting with the timing of this and the fact that we had that, and we'll probably get into this, that 2 years ago, almost to the day, for me, certainly. Although I've had situations where I've had virtual teams over the years at different scales, different times. But I think the fact that the whole world was a virtual team, and some of the challenges and battles of virtual teams is we've encountered what took us 15 minutes to get 20 minutes to get this call on the show with my IT not working properly. Headphones that work normally stopped working, computers that just want to freeze and things like that. So it's not purely about the people stuff as well. It's the technology and all that sort of stuff that kind of things that we maybe not think about. But obviously with you thinking about this for many years as a concept, but it wasn't the norm. It was a kind of unusual teams that have to do that. And maybe in the, from my point of view, in the IT industry, probably a bit more common than some other industries. But what?
Yeah, I think lots of people, anyone doing international projects or programs, probably had, if you had a team in the US and you had a team in France, a team in India, and so on, then you were already getting used to hybrid teams, but in a very different way. They'd all be in the room together, but in lots of different places at once. Whereas now we've got it a bit different with people coming in and out, sometimes in, sometimes not.
Yeah, and I think that because when I think back to my first sort of virtual team experiences, it was when I was working over in a little bit in when I worked at Barclays a little bit, but before that, when I was working with Oracle and consulting around there, where I had one guy who was the only member on my team. I was in the UK and he was in Malaysia. He was an expat who'd gone over to Malaysia, so that was my first sort of dealing with time zones and things like that, and which kind of made me and email was kind of the only tool then. We didn't have video, we didn't have, and building relationships in the org I was in, and then I was starting looking at things which were we were starting to use development teams in India. So we'd have development teams over there, a bit like you said, where you've got them in the room and a couple of people there, and that brought different challenges, not just time zones, but communication and things like that. So
language and culture and face saving is a big deal, often working with teams in India and China, and knowing how to ask the right questions to find out what you need. And we need to adapt. We can't just expect everybody in our teams to adapt. Yeah, I started off doing virtual completely unexpectedly. It was 2001, and I'd just been given my first ever program, which is very, very exciting. And the program involved projects that were going to be running concurrently all over the world, and everybody all the different project managers and key people on the program were going to travel to New York to spend 2 weeks together doing a proper kickoff like we used to, getting it all sorted. And then everyone would go back to their countries and then run the projects, and I would be coordinating it from the UK. So the trouble is that the date on my ticket was the 13th of September 2001. Yes, you remember, Nigel, 9/11, and we were grounded. We couldn't fly for 3 months. So all of a sudden, no kickoff meeting, but we still had to get the projects done. So what we did instead, we used 2001 technology, and I was working for Mars Incorporated at the time, and we actually managed it. But we didn't spend all the time on video meetings, because this video on desktop didn't exist. So we did it all by conference calls and lots of short slots spread out over a long period of time. But also we could book the video suite. Do you remember those in the big corner of the offices? And this incredibly expensive kit
with a strange,
it was really hard to book.
That did that and then moved around and looked at you. The more advanced ones, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. So and then chat and we did an awful lot of conference calls. In fact, had I written the book 5 years earlier, the virtual leadership book, it would have been called Conference Calls Made Easy, and it wouldn't have really helped at all in the pandemic, would it? No. Whereas it went a bit nuts. So it used to be that I worked a lot with people who were doing international projects, often in big IT companies or pharma companies, financial services companies, where they had people scattered around the world, just like you described. And then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, I had teachers, people from universities, I had doctors, local government clerks, all sorts of people were picking up my book that I'd written essentially for international project managers in 2015 and finding it really helpful.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, hang on, I spent lots of time thinking this through, and if I've got this to the right level, it should work really well in this pandemic, and it did, which is really really good. But yeah, it was so nice to be able to think actually something I've done from this disaster of 9/11 that threw everything off awry and was a real struggle at the time to cope with,
Yeah.
actually helped loads and loads of people, and I'm really pleased that that was possible.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's the reason for creating these books. It's like there's two reasons, isn't there? You're either looking to entertain or to make people's lives easier. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's inform, entertain, or make
Yeah.
people's lives easier. And I
But
know,
it's for me, I don't know if it's so for you as well, Nigel, but when I write things for a book, I have to really think it through and get it structured. And the quality of the thinking, things like refining models and getting examples and putting things down in writing in a structured form really helps your thinking, I think. So what comes out at the end of writing a book is much clearer, much better, especially when you have beta readers to help, which I always have people who will read through and help me,
yeah,
which is brilliant.
yeah. I think it is that when it's the same with any kind of communication, really. So even when you're doing a presentation, as long as you're not cut and pasting everything that you've got on the data, as long as you're trying to focus on that message and you start putting yourself a little bit in the other person's place, and if you do that, you start to write what you've written, and you go, well, if I'm in their shoes, they ain't going to understand what I mean because I haven't told them about this, this, and this. And then you've got to balance that between telling them everything and all of the things you're thinking about. And I think it's the examples, the stories that, and I do believe that a lot of the time with the best way, and I think we do it anyway, the communication of us as project managers is about storytelling. Yeah, if you're pitching to your stakeholders, if you're trying to convince your team, it's about the story that's always in there, and whatever that story is, it will be a different story. But it has to be relatable, and that's where lots of analogies are used a lot of the time, but actually stories of experience and these sort of things. And I think I think everyone now, if you turned around to them, who's sort of in an information role, you say to them, right, give me an example of where working with someone virtually has worked really well and where it has worked really badly. Everyone's got a story now, haven't they? Whereas 3 years ago, what, 10% of the room, maybe, potentially?
Yeah.
The others are, well, I just walk to the desk and grab them and get them in a room by the coffee shop. That's how I solve that problem.
People used to say to me, Penny, what do you mean virtual leadership? And in fact, my dad, who I dedicated the book to, said to me, virtual, doesn't that mean it's not really real? Ha 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 ha. Virtual leadership, not proper leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now everyone knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Leadership in virtual. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? It's because I've had teams, and again, teams where UK based, where I was traveling around the country a lot, where I was going to visit them every week. So I would be going around. I had at the time, with your virtual leadership book, what would you want to talk about the key sort of, what's the message, as Keith Lemon would say on ITV's TV thing? What is the main driver behind that? What is the key bits that you takeaways that people would get if they grab the book?
So there's one, which is that I think people get fixated by technology. And for me, technology is merely what you need. It's the foundation. Obviously, you can't do this without technology.
Yeah.
That's phone or video or whatever, but ways to connect and collaborate. But people get fixated on it. And actually, what really makes a difference is not the technology, but the virtual leadership. It's a little bit like if you were living in a house. I'm based in England. I think you are as well, Nigel.
Yeah.
Electricity is necessary to live in the 21st century in England. Would you agree? Yeah, absolutely. But we don't spend our whole time focused on the electricity. We make sure it's working and that it's safe, and then we focus on everything else to make a house a home. And I think the virtual technology is like that. Yes, it needs to be functioning. We need to know how to use it. But to really make a hybrid or fully remote project or work or team go really well, what matters is the virtual leadership. How's that for starters?
Yeah, I get that. It's what you do with the tool, isn't it? It's not the tool in itself, and it's that, I say, the electricity. Every so often you get wobbles with electricity, and you grab some candles out the drawer, you keep some candles. Every so often you'll get a problem with the internet, you get a problem with that, so you need to have different tools that you can pick up and rely on. Maybe not going down to carrier pigeons, but you know what I mean, in communication there are that, heaven forbid, picking up the phone and ringing someone rather than using a video call is something that is amazing. My phone rang the other day and I was shocked.
Don't say heaven forbid, because actually you may find that if people have been on video calls and long video meetings, being able to have a phone conversation, you know, maybe you could go for a walk during the phone conversation. Well-being is something. Well-being something that's really been focused on a lot. I mean, with a background of a global pandemic, of course, it has had to be. But you know, you don't have to sit in front of a screen all day, every day if you're doing virtual. You really don't. No, it's not a good idea.
I think I absolutely agree, and I found that one of the things that that I scribbled about in my little book about getting a bit better productivity, I couldn't talk about what more about my experiences with remote working and the things that I've got. I'm sat in an office. It may not look like it in behind me, but I'm sat in my little office here, and I had my desk facing the wall, and I spent however many months the wrong way round. Didn't see any daylight. I would be having long days, and I was getting pains and everything. And the thing that I found recently, I've been getting much better at it. And the thing I said is, walking meetings are so useful, especially if you no presentations and if you are more consuming than contributing, because of if it's sensitivities or confidentiality issues, but and you have to balance those. But the other week we had a meeting where I thought, oh, I've just done the school run, so I've done that. I'd gone on one meeting where I'd just given a quick update, 15 minutes, and then there was another hour meeting. So I stayed on that call. I was actually using Microsoft Teams at the time, but I'd got it on the phone and Bluetooth to my ear, and I had an hour's walk while contributing and consuming information, which but you need to make your brain needs to think, how do I do it? And actually I find that I don't know about you, but I find if I'm walking and talking to someone, quite often I'm thinking differently, or even simply just sitting out in my garden and talking to them rather than sitting in the office. Like when we had some recent spell of nice warm weather, I was sitting in the garden chatting to people about stuff, and it massive difference to your energy levels and how you feel, and therefore how you deal with the people you're working with.
Absolutely. What I could do for those who are watching on video, I could share the model that I use to describe what YouTube is. Would that be good? Yeah. And then I can also talk it through, so anyone listening on audio can
fantastic,
can get that as well. So here we are. If we start in the beginning, at the center of the model, what we've got here is lots of concentric circles, and right in the middle there is the central circle says self, and I think that's where you start if you want to be a better leader. A virtual leader is to decide to step up yourself, to know what is your mindset around leadership, because if it's anything like command and control, if it's traditional leadership, I think everybody now knows you need to shift from that, because command and control does not work when you are facilitating a dispersed network of people. It just doesn't work. You need to know your own values. You need to know your preferences, your strengths, your weaknesses, aspects of your identity, all sorts of things that are really helpful, that the book goes into a little bit more. The next level out is is when you so we've looked at the core, the center of all these concentric circles. The next circle out is focused on others. So the people that you're going to work with or that you are working with. What about them? What are their preferences? What are their values? What are aspects of their identity? What are their strengths and their weaknesses? And how can you build this group of people together to work together effectively? Then the next step, going out beyond there, is that's where technology jumps in. And yeah, there we are. So
Yeah, I can see.
you can see we've got technology at that level. So what I want to try and stop people doing is think about technology as the utmost thing. It's the absolute core. It's not. It's how you get things done. It's like electricity in a house. So yes, we do need to be able to work with technology. We do need to be able to run really effective virtual meetings, whether that's fully remote, which in some ways is easier than hybrid.
Yeah.
Because there you've got the lack of a level playing field, and there's all sorts of challenges. I mean, you can get around it, but you need to think about it carefully. There's a whole chapter in the book about
It's harder to plan those meetings than, as you say, one or the other, because that engagement of other people when they're remote or when they're in an office, and it can, depending on where I suppose the primary group is where that's where that group can kind of take over, if you like, can't they?
Yeah, so you need to be really careful. And again, it's around facilitation. So if you're the project manager with this group, you'll want to facilitate the room. You'll want to plan it carefully. You want to make sure, if you have hybrid, you want to make sure that everyone can be seen and heard just as easily as everybody else, that you have physical reminders of people who in the room, the people who are away. And if you have lots of different rooms and some people present and some in person and some people connecting remotely, you can do a lot of work in small groups. Have the people in the room working together in small groups, have people who are joining remotely working in breakout rooms, and have people who are joining from other physical locations to work as small groups as well. So that's quite a nice way to make it work. But it's this whole thing about leveling the playing field, and that takes quite a lot of doing. The other thing I noticed, and that's the other thing at this level, and I noticed when suddenly the pandemic hit, is that people went to working almost all day, 8 till 8, on one meeting to another, perpetual Zoom calls or Teams calls or whatever, which is completely nuts. And we need to get good at working as appropriate meetings when it makes sense, which is not nearly as much as most people do. And then working asynchronously. So working at times to suit ourselves on our own, but working in sync with working with others, but we don't all have to be present in front of a camera at the same time. This also means that virtual, whether fully remote or hybrid, disconnects working time. We used to have to be in the office from 9 till 5 when I started work many years ago. I'm sure it's expanded now, for, more like 8:30 to 6 or longer. But actually, if you're working remotely or in a hybrid way, and you work far better earlier in the morning and late at night, perhaps this allows flexibility for you to do your best work. And if we're focusing on outputs rather than inputs, which we should be, then that's important too.
Yeah, I think that inputs outputs thing is it, and I've seen. I was reading something the other day about the 4-day week that is very much getting focused at the moment, and around and the fact that if we are focusing on products produced, productivity of our organization, rather than, as you say, hours sat twiddling your thumbs playing Minesweeper, as would be the kind of scenario. And I think the thing that disappointed me was where it sort of kind of talked about shift work, and it said, shift work would move from 10 hours. And I'm like, again, I suppose depending on the type of jobs there are, but again, if you're talking shift work, if you're talking inputs again, but maybe that's the time is the output as well sometimes, isn't it? But I think you're right, moving to get the job done and do it when you need to do it. And
Yeah.
an example this morning, there was something I wanted to do partway through today. I started early this morning. I had some finance prep to do for a finance meeting. So I did that prep for an hour this morning so that I had that flexibility later on to do some. So I blocked out my diary. I think blocking out diaries and respecting other people's blocked out diaries is something that is key in this scenario nowadays, and sometimes isn't that common. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Penny, and next episode we'll have the second part of that interview, so come back then. If it's your first time to listen, make sure you click that subscribe button in your app, and then you'll be able to have it downloaded straight away, in which case that's it. Let's speak to you next time. If you enjoyed the show, it would be brilliant if you would like to support it. Number of ways you can do that. Number one is sharing it with your friends and colleagues. The more people who hear about it, the more people get to get the experience from my fantastic guests. If you want to go a bit more than that, you could jump onto wherever you listen to this and give me a review. 5 stars would be lovely. And if you want to look at throwing some cash towards me, there are a number of ways you can do that. You can pop along to the Patreon/SundayLunchPM there, or you could grab one of the books that I've published over the years and obviously get a little bit of cash from those. On the website, under the shop, under the shop, I've got links to all of my previous guests' books, and Andy and Joel's is on there. And if you jump along to there, you can buy a copy of their books, and I get a little kickback from that too. And obviously, with our new headline sponsor of Tamplo, popping along, signing up, and if you end up using it, I will get a kickback there as well. So finally, obviously, as I say every time, the most important thing though is come back next time. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.